Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. His name is Mark Shaw. He's an author. He's written many books. This will be our seventh show. Our first show was back in 2021. It's hard to believe this much time has
Really?
passed. But we talked about what was formerly a new book, and that book is Collateral Damage: The Mysterious Deaths of Marilyn Monroe and Dorothy Kilgallen, and the ties that bind them to Robert Kennedy and the JFK assassination. And that book came out, I think, June 1st, 2021. But some of it's really incredible because it's still present information. We're talking in the pre-show about this JFK document release, 80,000 documents. I've been trying to follow other noted JFK researchers online and see what they're looking at. I've had Jefferson Morley on, who has written books about James Jesus Angleton and done JFK facts and all this. He's a very noted JFK researcher, and he's done a lot of kind of this stuff. So trying to follow some of these new documents. But the other shows that Mark and I have done, we've covered some of his other books, Down for the Count, about Mike Tyson, Melvin Belli, King of the Courtroom. We also did, I talked to him on his podcast, Mark Shaw Investigates. We did a follow-up to Collateral Damage. And then we did another show in 2023 about RFK Jr. repeating the assertion that the CIA killed JFK. But today we're going to talk about something that's dear to him. You'll see if you're watching this on Rumble, Rockfin, or X Twitter, you'll see this document that he sent out to this task force for the declassification of information of this federal secrets, I think they're calling it.
Yeah.
The task force for the declassification of federal secrets. It's headed by Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna. And he just sent them a letter recently. And there's still information like these articles that he's also sent me about this person I just mentioned, Kilgallen, who mysteriously died. And who I show in the cover here, she was with Melvin Belli. We also covered Melvin Belli, who was Ruby's lawyer. But it's still in the news. It's still going on. There's still things happening, still talking about it. But Mark can talk more about that. So, Mark, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, William. Appreciate it.
So for people who may not have heard our earlier shows, maybe you can do a little bit. I know that we have this is like covering of some of your books. Maybe you can just do a overview of your books and then lead us up to what's going on presently.
Well, thank you. I got quite a shock here the first part of March when I heard that there was going to be this task force. The president had ordered a task force that was going to look into the deaths of JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, and some other sordid materials. I had no idea that that was going to happen. I want to just drop back a little bit because investigations, William, of those deaths, not so much MLK, but JFK and Robert Kennedy, go all the way back to 1963, obviously. There was the Warren Commission, obviously, and we can talk about that bogus the conclusion they came up with. Then they had the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which looked into the assassination. Then there was a Church Committee, Frank Church, a senator, they looked into that. And now we're all the way around to the task force for this government going forward. And I want to talk about some of the members and what their edict was to get involved. What was interesting to me when I started reading about the task force was the ignoring of Dorothy Kilgallen. It talked about, that they were going to go to Dallas and they were going to talk to people there who may have been around when the JFK was killed. They were going to the sixth floor museum, which is basically a shrine to Oswald. They were going to look into this person and that person and everything else. And just as with the Warren Commission, where Dorothy was left out, I was shocked to see that there was no mention of Dorothy Kilgallen, who had the most credible investigation of the JFK assassination in history. So I decided to do what I could to get their attention because otherwise what's going to occur is they're going to make the same mistakes that the Warren Commission made. Now, you just have my books up there, and I think your audience would be interested to know how this all came about, and just quickly, and how I ended up on Dorothy Kilgallen. Well, it's amazing to me over the years, William, and I'm not trying to be humble or whatever, how information has come to me. I wish it had come to someone a lot smarter than me, but it's come to me. I get it from supporters all around the world who send me things, but there's all of these kind of illogical times when information comes to me, just as we will talk about Robert Kennedy's death in a little while, because another person that's completely ignored by the task force, in fact, the documents being released today, is Robert Kennedy. There's nothing in the documents much about him at all. So if you can just go up a little bit. What happened here was this. I started to look into the life up. Now I can't see the Melvin Belli book. Maybe you can just move that a little bit. There you go. This was the lawyer for Melvin, or for Jack Ruby, as you know. And I have an advantage about this case, because about all these matters, because I practiced law with Melvin Belli in the 1980s. I think I told you that on the program one time. I knew him in San Francisco.
Yes, you did.
I had an office in his building. And I learned a few things about Belli. He was an incredible attorney. The demonstrative evidence that people see when they go into a jury trial for personal injury, that was all Belli. He came up with those ideas. He had a skeleton that he brought in, and he would do all these things. So he was a genius in that area. But I also learned that he was kind of a mafioso. He really wanted to be known as somebody who was close to the mafia. His office kind of looked like a mafia office. He would go to Las Vegas a lot and hang out with those guys. It was kind of fun for him to do that. He was kind of a guy that wanted everybody to think that he was a bad guy with the mafia. And the other thing I found out about him, he's married 6 times. And he had no morals really at all, and ethics and so on and so forth in the courtroom. He would do anything to win. And that kind of permitted me to finally break ties with him. I moved to Los Angeles and everything like that. But I finally decided I wanted to write a biography of him. And so in about 2015 or whatever, I wrote Melvin Belli, King of the Courtroom. That's this book here that you've got up there. And nobody else had ever written a biography of him. He'd written autobiographies of his, which mostly contained a bunch of junk that wasn't true. So I wrote that book. And I was proud of the book, and it did very well. And so that was interesting. But I learned about his mafia connections in that book. And so that made me wonder about his representation of Jack Ruby, because there always had been conjecture. And I'm very careful not to speculate in my books, but there was conjecture that he was really tied in with the mafia, and I was able to show that basically that was true. His main client was Mickey Cohen, who was that's the cover that's up on Amazon now. It's a fascinating book, it really is, and I think people would enjoy it. But I found out that his main client was Mickey Cohen. Well, if you've heard that name, that was a Las Vegas gangster that was described in an FBI folder that I got that was a cold-blooded killer. And his best buddy was Carlos Marcello, the mafioso in New Orleans, who will come into our view for a while. So the kicker here, and the reason I bring it up, is because while I was investigating his life and times, and then jump in if you have a question, I went ahead and found out that from a good friend of his that said to him, well, Mel, knew Dorothy Kilgallen. And I said, being naive, who is that? Because I had never heard her name before that time. And he said, well, Mark, you don't know anything about her. She was a college dropout who worked her way up from a cub reporter at one of the major newspapers in New York City to becoming what the New York Post called the most powerful female voice in America. You don't know. She had her newspaper column was circulated to 200,000 people a day. She had a radio show listened to by 1 million people. And also, she was on What's My Line, which was a famous quiz show in the 1950s and 60s. And by the way, what's interesting now, and I guess people are giving me a little credit for it by bringing her name back into the limelight, Prime Video now has 80 episodes of What's My Line up there. And you can go watch them, and they're hilarious. People that don't know, it was a panel including Dorothy and two others, and MC was John Daly. And they guessed people's unusual occupations. And on the first episode there, Dorothy, they have a mystery guest, so the panelists are blindfolded, and they tried to guess it, and Dorothy guessed the death of Eve Arden, who, for us old people, I just turned 80 years old, was our Miss Brooks for years and years on CBS. And so those videos are up there now, and people can watch them there as well as on YouTube. But what was interesting to me when I was working on the Belli book is that this friend of Belli's said to me, and by the way, not only did Belli know her, but when Dorothy Kilgallen died, and we'll get into her mysterious death, Belli said, "They've killed Dorothy. Now they'll go after Jack Ruby." Well, I'm like you, William. We have great curiosity, which is great for what we do. And that particular comment did not get out of my mind, but I didn't turn right away to looking into Dorothy's death. Instead, I wanted to know about Belli's connection to Mickey Cohen and Mickey Cohen's connection to Carlos Marcello. So I looked into the 1960 election. Any questions at all right now, or you want me to go ahead?
Just following, yeah. Just to tell the story. It's great. I'm listening with great interest.
I wrote this book, The Poisoned Patriarch. And the betrayals of Joseph P. Kennedy caused the assassination of JFK. And what I found was, which is common knowledge really, is that Joe Kennedy wanted to be president of the United States. He had all the wealth, some of it gotten by illegal means, but he had all the wealth, and he wanted to be president of the United States. But while he was ambassador to Great Britain, he got too palsy-walsy, well, that's an old term, with Adolf Hitler. He admired Hitler and all of that. So when he came back to the United States, his reputation was shot. So you'll be interested in this, I think your viewers will. He said to himself, well, if I can't be president, then my sons will. And he actually came up with the idea, not a dream, the idea of first Joseph Kennedy Jr., but he died in World War II. Then it was going to be JFK, Bobby, and Ted. First up was JFK. So he was a senator. He and Bobby Kennedy went after the mafia while they were there. So it showed that they hated him and everything. But more than that, JFK ran for president and gets Richard Nixon. And Joe Kennedy found out that JFK was going to lose that election to Nixon unless they won the electoral votes in West Virginia and Illinois. So Joe had underworld contacts, and he got a hold of Carlos Marcello, Sam Giancana, others, and said, here's the deal. You help us win the White House by basically fixing the elections in those two states. And when we're in the office, the White House, we'll leave you guys alone. So what I found out in my research for The Poisoned Patriarch was that Joe double-crossed him. And what he did is, and I have a witness, I really pride myself on primary witnesses in my books, primary sources. And I found a witness who was right there at a lunch or a breakfast with Joe Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and JFK, when JFK and Joe basically forced JFK to appoint Bobby Kennedy Attorney General. He had no experience whatsoever. He was a lawyer. He'd never set foot in a courtroom. Now he's Attorney General. Well, he hated the mafioso so much that the first thing he did was go after Carlos Marcello. And I look at motive with regard to all of my investigations. I think a lot like you do. You want to that's the homicides detective's best friend, along with, of course, benefit from the crime. You can look at means and opportunity, but if you can look at motive and benefit from the crime, you're going to be able to solve a lot of homicides. And I knew a lot of homicide detectives when I was a criminal defense lawyer and handled almost all murder cases. That's what they used to tell me. And so I looked into motive because Bobby Kennedy, the first thing that he did was illegally go ahead and deport Carlos Marcello, who ran all of the rackets and the prostitution and everything else in New Orleans, to Guatemala, threw him out of the country, tricked him and threw him out of the country. And obviously, Marcello was quite upset about that. The New York Times wrote an article about it, said it was kidnapping. Anyway, he got back into the country, and he vowed revenge against Bobby Kennedy. Nick Pileggi, who's a rather famous author, Casino, and a couple other books, told me once that Sicilians, and that's what Marcello was, their middle name is Revenge. And you don't want to mess around with those guys. And I think I've told this story before, and I'll just do it quickly. But when I was working for Good Morning America, I was their legal correspondent, and I handled these different cases and things. They sent me to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to talk to the lawyer for Angelo Bruno, who was the king mafioso in Philadelphia, about the mafia infiltrating Atlantic City. And we were surprised that this guy would talk to us because, they have the code of silence and all that. So I flew over to Philadelphia, and I went to this guy's office, and I sat there, and he talked to me and told me things that I didn't really think he should tell me. They played that on Good Morning America the next day, and it was a big hit, as you can imagine, because we were inside the mafioso. So the producer called me and said, "Mark, listen, do you think he'll talk to you again?" I said, "I don't know. I'll call his office." So I called the office, and I got the secretary, and I said, "By the way, Mark Shaw, Good Morning America, I'd like to talk to your boss." I can't remember his name. And she said, well, and then I could tell she was silent and she was crying. And I said, "Well, are you okay?" "Well, Mr. Shaw," I get chills when I say this. "Well, Mr. Shaw, when I guess you don't know, when my boss started his car this morning, it blew up and killed him." You cannot mess around with those guys. I had many offers to represent mafioso, and I never took one of them, because once they control you, your life will never be the same. So anyway, Marcello got back in the United States. Well, revenge, what's he going to do? Well, he wants to kill Jack Kennedy because that will take care. I mean, he wants to tell Bobby Kennedy because that will take care of that debt of revenge. But he knows if he does, JFK will come after Marcello with everything he can. So what's the deal? Well, let's look at the logic and the motive. Let's set up JFK for his death, and then Bobby Kennedy will be powerless. And that's exactly what happened. And as we'll learn later, Dorothy Kilgallen knew about that. So I looked at Marcello. Bobby Kennedy did go ahead and try to deport him and all of that, but for the most part, Marcello they never went after Marcello again. So that was in The Poison Patriarch, and I really enjoyed writing that book. It was a good book, and it contained a lot of information that nobody else had. So that was where I was at that point, William. And then, as you know, I decided, as you would, I think, because you're such a good researcher and investigator, I couldn't get that quote out of my mind, like you do. They've killed Dorothy, then they'll go after. They've killed Jack. They killed
Dorothy,
Ruby,
and now they'll go after Ruby, right?
Kilgallen. Now
Kilgallen 65, right? So she passed away mysteriously.
So we'll get into that. But the first thing I did was I decided to look into Dorothy Kilgallen, and to my amazement, I had no idea who she was. I just listed some of her accomplishments. Hell, she covered the Dr. Sam Shepard case that became The Fugitive, the Charles Lindbergh baby kidnapping case. All of these different cases, and she was at the coronation of the Queen, won a Emmy for it. All these different kinds of things that happened. And so I was amazed when I learned all of that, mother of three. And as I started to look into it then more and more, I found out that one of the things that was most interesting about Dorothy, she was a very, very, very close friend of Jack Kennedy. He had been to her home on 68th Street in New York City, played cards there, gone to parties there. She had seen him at all the water holes in New York City, Sardi's and all those places, and they were very close friends. In fact, so close that at one point he invited Dorothy, and you may have a photograph of this with her youngest son, Kerry, to the White House. And it's probably in there someplace. And it's down the ways, I think. Anyway, to the White House, and Kerry took a bunch of letters from his third grade. No, it's not in there. Third grade class, and gave them to the president. And the president made a big fuss over all of that. And so that made her really proud of him and admiring of the president. So then you go ahead, and Dorothy is doing all these things. There it is, right there. That's him, and he will figure in her investigation very much so. Well, we'll just mention that right now. So he invited Kerry and Dorothy there, and the president made a fuss over Kerry. So now things are moving along. She has all the things she's doing, and then she and Kerry are sitting at home and hear about JFK being killed. And it hit her really hard. It hit Kerry hard. And she just was, and then she watched Jack Ruby shoot Lee Harvey Oswald. And she knew that something was wrong here. There obviously in her mind had to be a plot to kill the president. Now, of course, J. Edgar Hoover at that time was out there shouting, Oswald alone, Oswald alone. And everybody was buying this. But Dorothy decided she had to do something about it. So the first thing that she did was get permission from her newspaper. We'll come back to Melvin Belli there with Dorothy at the trial, Ruby trial, was to go to Dallas. And she did. And the first thing she did was go to Dealey Plaza. There's photographs in the new book, Injustice of the First Degree, which is my new book that will come out in the fall, where I connect the deaths of Dorothy Kilgallen, JFK, and Robert Kennedy for the first time. That will come in the fall. But anyway, she went to Dallas. She went to Dealey Plaza, and one most important thing happened. She interviewed Jesse Curry, who people may remember was the Dallas police chief. And he told her that when he heard the first shots, he did not send his officers to the book depository. He sent them to the overpass. And that right away told her that, wait a second, this whole Oswald alone deal may not make sense. So what she did is she went ahead and started investigating. And in the materials that I sent, they'll find out that I sent to
to Luna, to Congressperson Luna.
What's that?
The stuff you sent to Congressperson
You can
Luna?
go up a little bit if you would.
Yeah, is it in the pictures or the other one?
Keep going, you'll come up to her columns.
Okay, well, that's the other document. Let's bring the
That's
other.
the other document. Find the
Let me get it
Luna
back.
document.
Yeah,
For the task force. There we go. Now go up a little way. All right, so a little bit further. Now, what was amazing to me when I found out, at least so far, that the task force was going to leave Dorothy out of this investigation is to go back and look at Dorothy's investigation and everything that she did. So the first thing that she did was she decided the Oswald file must not close. Now you have to remember, every reporter was eating alive everything that J. Edgar Hoover said about Oswald alone. Okay, not Dorothy. You can read these, but people can also look in my books. The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, Denial of Justice, Collateral Damage, and Fighting for Justice. Lyndon Johnson. Whoops. We lost it. No, let's go back to that one. Yeah, there we go. No, the Oswald alone. No, there's so many of them. Lyndon Johnson has been elevated so swiftly to his new high post that in one sense he has been snatched up to the ivory tower. The chief executive is no longer in a position to hear the voices of ordinary people talking candidly and so on and so forth. And he must realize that he must be sure that the mystery of Lee Harvey Oswald is solved and laid before the nation down to the smallest shred of evidence. Then he went ahead and said, before going forward, careful consideration of these words is a must. because the mystery of Dorothy Kilgallen is solved, and so on and so forth. And then this next one is, Dorothy Kilgallen, by the way, if I could write as well as she did, I have a number of bestsellers instead of just one, because she was a gifted wordsmith. Just listen to what she says here. The case is closed, is it? Well, I'd like to know, in a big, smart town like Dallas, a man like Jack Ruby, owner of a strip-tease honky-tonk, can stroll in and out of police headquarters as if it was a health club at a time when a small army of law enforcement is keeping a tight security on Oswald. Security, what a word for it. And then this next two sentences are really capsulize the entire investigation for 18 months that Dorothy took on, the most credible in history. Justice is a big rug. When you pull it out from under one man, a lot of others fall too. That was a warning. That was a warning to LBJ, a warning to Marcello, a warning to Hoover. I'm on the job. That is why so many people believe there is something queer about the killing of Oswald, something strange along the way his case was handled, a great deal missing in the official count. And this one, the American people have just lost a beloved president. It is a dark chapter in our history, but we have the right to read every word of it. It cannot be locked in a file in Dallas. Doesn't that just jump out at you as well, William, in terms of this woman deciding, I am on the job, I am going to find out what happened here, right?
Not only that, she's anticipating that they're going to cover it up, right? Which is what happened. She's anticipating they're going to lock it in a file in Dallas, which ties into what's happening this week.
That certainly does. That's for sure. All right, let's go down a little further. All right, so then let's go back to here. It just drives me crazy. I'm so frustrated because I have this evidence, and I'm just wary of the task force using it, because this is most important historically. There's no question about it. Not only did she write these columns, but she's the only one reporter at the Ruby trial. She was there, not like a lot of these other experts and so on and so forth. Even Mr. Morley, who I respect in some ways, he wasn't there. Dorothy Kilgallen was there. She was in the front row at the trial. And what happened? Jack Ruby asked to talk to her, and she wrote about this. She said, Jack Ruby's eyes. Listen to this prose. Jack Ruby's eyes were as shiny brown and white, bright as the glass eyes of a doll. He tried to smile, but his smile was a failure. When he shook hands, his hands troubled in mine ever so slightly, like the heartbeat of a bird. Continuing the article, Kilgallen, I'm nervous and I'm worried, he told me. I feel like I'm on the verge of something I don't understand, the breaking point, maybe. When Kilgallen said Ruby, I think you're holding up pretty well, he said, I'm fooling you, Dorothy. I'm really scared. Carl Sandburg's The Future will spend a lifetime to analyze the drama of this week. When it all boils down after the assassination of the slaying of police and the killing of a man nobody knew, is little Jack Ruby, the hustler in the black suit and the very white shirt, neat and nervous, is the star of the show at last. If he died tomorrow, and he won't, he would die happy in the knowledge that he had made the big time. So there's eyewitness account of her talking to Ruby and his impressions of her and everything. Then's the next one.
Do you want to go to the next page?
Yeah, next column.
Okay.
All right, so still alive topic, and this also happened to come out as the tragedy we cannot forget. Say that again slowly. Information concerning Oswald's assassination of the president will not be available. Perhaps it is dramatic to say that there is an Orwellian note in the line. It appears that Washington knows or suspects something about Lee Harvey Oswald that is not what Dallas and the rest of the world to know or respect. Why is Oswald being kept in the shadows, a dim figure as they can make him? Who is Oswald anyway? See, she's asking those questions. Now, You have to know that Hoover and Marcello and all these people who are saying it's Oswald alone and have, I believe, some way of having been involved in the JFK assassination. I mean, they got to be reading these columns. The Warren Commission members who are going to be on the commission, they have to be reading this too. It was in 200,000 newspapers across the country. I've never been able to find any newspaper that has this in there. They just ignored it. Now, why? Your listener might, or your viewers might want to know why. I have two feelings about it. Number one, she was a woman, and as hard as it is for women to get, notices these days, back then, they weren't even supposed to be in the car behind the back seat of the car. They were supposed to be in the car behind that. Dorothy went through all of this gender discrimination. I think that was one reason, that she didn't have the credibility. All right. The other one, I think the fact that she was on a quiz show. It was easy to say, hey, how can we, give her any credibility? She's on a quiz show.
Right.
And I think
Delegitimize her. Yeah.
Exactly. Let's go to the next one. All right. So this was $1 million question at the time. Was Ruby and Oswald, were they linked? Could anybody do that? Everybody wanted to do that. That was the chief the question at the time. Can we do that? So Dorothy then had gotten inside information that the DA was going to link Ruby to Oswald. I would imagine that when this column I would have hoped when this column came out, that would have been huge news because nobody had been able to do that. So she says, among those who know the senior side of Dallas business, betting 10-1 that District Attorney Hank Wade will produce witnesses who will testify that Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald were acquainted. Ruby has said repeatedly he didn't know the alleged assassin, but then Ruby's plea is, listen to this, plea is temporary insanity, and there is a great many things he doesn't remember and isn't about to. And then she goes on and talks about the Carousel Club, and supposedly Oswald could have been there. So she's way ahead of her time here. No other reporter who covered the JFK assassination from any country in the world or any state in the United States wrote anything like this. I can't find anybody who did. She was the lone wolf here. Go ahead, please. The next one. Okay. This was one of the $1 million questions at the time. Why did Oswald risk all by shooting the cop, Tippit? Because it made no sense whatsoever. He's trying to get away, all right, from the sixth floor, or from the book depository building and all of that. Supposedly, he comes across this policeman, and instead of beating him up or taking off or running, supposedly he shoots the cop. And she says a mysterious and significant aspect of the events following the assassination of President Kennedy in Dallas has never been explored publicly, although it must occur to crack reporters carrying the case as well as investigators. The important question, why did Lee Harvey Oswald, presumably fleeing from the police after the assassination, approach patrolman J.D. Tippett's car in broad daylight with witnesses standing by and shoot the policeman 3 times, although he had not said a word to Oswald? Now, William, it doesn't take, a brain surgeon here for people to read these columns if they would have and said, hey, there's really something wrong here. But I will tell you this. I heard about the JFK assassination, this reveals my age, when I was a freshman in college at Purdue University. And it came over the radio, and I cried, and I didn't go to class, and all of that. But immediately, I heard on the radio or the television probably, Hoover out there yelling Oswald alone. And back then we trusted him. We didn't know he was one of the seediest, most dishonest individuals that ever set foot on the face of the earth. So we bought all that, and everybody wanted to buy it because it was just this lone nut Oswald. He killed the president. The FBI, Hoover was protecting himself. The FBI couldn't be responsible, right? And all of that. And so we all did that. We didn't ask questions about this. And then she goes on to explain a whodunit fan would infer that the policeman knew something about Oswald that was so dangerous he had to be silenced at any cost. But even Oswald's escape. But that didn't make any sense. The common sense there didn't work out, and that bothered her, even though she was trying to figure out exactly what happened and focusing as she would on Ruby.
Tippit was assassinated. It was 2 in the chest, 1 in the head. This is like they want him dead. It
I have
wasn't
never
like
known that. Is that right?
yeah. So this wasn't like 3 in the chest.
Do you have a source of that? You might
I
send
can
me?
find it. Yeah.
Would you please? I'm
Yeah.
going to make a note of it. But that is really
I think it's
interesting.
in the oh gosh, Joseph Mick book he wrote about Tippit. I forgot his name.
Okay. Well, I'll look it up and find it. Okay, what's next? I want to get through these. I don't want to wear your audience out. All right. Then we get to the fact. All right. What did Dorothy do? All right. In between the time that she investigated in Dallas and the time that the Warren Commission came up. Well, she went ahead with her investigation and all of that. But then one of her, she had gone to, and this is something that's in the new book, Injustice of the First Degree. And by that, I mean injustice worse than regular injustice. Just awful. No investigation, terrible things. Anyway, this is in that book because what happened here is that she had made friends with Senator John Sherman Cooper's legislative assistant, as I put in my book, Fighting for Justice. That's this one here. This was out a couple years ago now, Fighting for Justice. And it was in there that she had made friends with Senator John Sherman Cooper at what she called soirees in Georgetown that were that Cooper's wife had organized.
It's like the Georgetown set. She probably didn't know how dangerous having some of those association was.
There you go.
Yeah.
So she knew him, and then wasn't too long after that she was walking up to the offices of the New York Journal-American, and a man walked up to her and showed her a copy of the Life magazine. On the cover was Lee Harvey Oswald with his, I never can pronounce it, gun, Mana, whatever it was called, gun.
Mannlicher Carcano.
That's right, gun. And she said, "What's this?" And he said, "Look inside." Honest to goodness, and I've proven this for sure. It was a copy of the Jack Ruby Warren Commission testimony, and he had not been released before. This is where Dorothy really got in trouble with the powers that be, these powerful men, because it was in there, and she read it, and then she went to her publisher and said, "We need to publish this." In the new book, there's the cover of the article where it says Ruby's story told. And a couple things happened there. First of all, she got in trouble with J. Edgar Hoover, and we'll mention that in a minute. But second, what he said to the Warren Commission completely conflicted with what he had said at trial, because there was a witness there. Ruby always said that he just happened to be close to the Dallas Police Department basement when Oswald was going to be transferred. Well, there was a witness at the Ruby trial who said that's not true. I was the parking lot manager across the street from the Carousel Club. We had a payphone. Ruby came over and used it, and I listened, and he said to whoever he was talking to, "Oswald will be transferred tomorrow. I will be there." So to Dorothy, that meant that this whole thing with Ruby accidentally being there, and she really got to started to get the feeling that Marcello, who had the strongest motive to kill JFK, had recruited, let's call it, Ruby to shoot Oswald. Because you see what happens there is the way the mafia works. Oswald escapes, so that's a loose end. Then Ruby kills him to take care of the loose end. Now what are you going to do with Ruby? Well, you order Melvin Belli to represent Jack Ruby at his trial and not let him testify, which is even though Ruby wanted to, and make him look like he's crazy. So you've
Yeah,
gone
don't
ahead.
forget Jolly is brought in and diagnoses him as a
Yeah,
paranoid schizophrenic or something
that's
like that,
right.
and then he gets cancer. And the
Yep,
book that I was
exactly.
trying to mention was the Joseph McBride, Into the Nightmare: My Search for the Killers of President JFK and Officer
Joseph
JD.
McBride. Okay, I'll take a look at that. Thank you very much.
I'll
I'll tell
repost
you,
that. I interviewed him in 2022.
you are something. I'll tell you. I'm so impressed with you. Anyway, so all right. So now she's in trouble, and I found the letter from Lee Rankin, who was part of the Warren Commission. Oh, okay, let's go with this then. So she finds out, of course, that Senator Cooper and also Senator Russell are members of the Warren Commission, but now she's got an inside track to the Warren Commission because she meets Morris Wolf, who is my star in the Fighting for Justice book. He was first of all, he was an assistant to Robert Kennedy in the Justice Department. And in Fighting for Justice, people will be just flabbergasted when they read that one of his jobs was to ride his bicycle between the White House and the Justice Department and carry secret documents back and forth between the two Kennedys. And the reason he did, as he told me in his interview, and he never talked to anybody else but me, which I was very honored to have happen. The reason he did that is because they didn't trust that J. Edgar Hoover wouldn't have tapped the phones that JFK and RFK were using. That is just so disgusting, but that's what happened. So Morris Wolf then worked for Robert Kennedy for a while, wrote part of the Civil Rights Act, and then John Sherman Cooper, Dorothy's friend, hired him to be a legislative assistant to John Sherman Cooper. And I was, when I talked to Morris Wolf, who got in touch with me, there's a video of mine that people might enjoy at the Allen Library, public library in Allen, Texas, near Dallas. It's probably 3 or 4 years ago, but more people have watched that video. I think there's 8 million views of that particular. It went viral. In fact, there are 15 million views of my interviews and presentations up on video on YouTube, which I'm very proud of. But basically, what Morris Wolf told me was that he was a legislative assistant for Cooper. He went to the hearings of the Warren Commission. He said it was interesting because the members very rarely ever went ahead and were even there to question the witnesses and stuff like that. It was really sad. And so he said also, there I am, long hair. You know, people that watch my videos, by the way,
Yeah, 8
your
million
audience,
views. 8 million
yeah,
views.
yeah, who you will get a kick out of this. They say two things. Number one, you still look like John Denver. And number two, get a haircut. Those are my two most comments. Anyway, so that was for denial of justice. Yeah,
What
and it
is the
went
pin?
viral.
What's the pin say on your jacket?
Justice for Dorothy.
Oh, nice. Gotcha.
I've been trying to get a justice for her forever, and we'll talk about that. So anyway, back to what we were talking about. So Dorothy then has an inside channel, you might say, to the Warren Commission. But Morris Wolf told me that he told her that basically Cooper had said, told him that this Warren Commission is a big farce. They know, for instance, that Jack Ruby has links to organized crime, and they don't care. Chief Justice Warren just wants to get this over with. It's Oswald alone, and that's it. So many other comments that he gave me that are in this letter that I sent to the task force, because no question about it, their investigation is no investigation, and then instead of Dorothy's way involved. So I sent all that in my letter and everything else that Morris Wolf told me, and I also told them that Morris Wolf is a lie. He can be interviewed by the commission. So she knows all this, and the Warren Commission, and she then Hoover is upset about the Ruby Warren Commission testimony. So I have this image in my mind. He sends these two FBI agents. I get the image that they're huge. Here's kind of a small little Dorothy in her townhouse. She has no lawyer, and they interrogate her. Where did you get the Warren Commission Ruby testimony? Da, 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 da. And they just ask her all these questions, which are in Fighting for Justice, and they'll be in the Justice for All book as well. And they're in the letter. And by the way, this letter is posted up on my blog on the internet now, so people can find it, and they can find it through your show as well. So anyway, and finally she says to them, they say, "What's your source?" She says, "I would rather die than give you my source." I think that's the most famous line by her, shows everything about her, her credibility, her honesty, her courage. You know, I've got in the new book, people don't know much about this, and I don't think I've told you. In 1936, Dorothy Kilgallen entered what was called the Race Around the World, which was a race with two reporters, male reporters in New York City. And you can look it up. It was a famous race. They used commercial transportation. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal these days, but that was ships, taxis, buses, railroad, all of that. And they went all around the world. In fact, Dorothy wrote a book about that called Girl Around the World. And I have the copyrights run out. I have copyrighted it now. And that book, I'm going to publish that book around her 60th anniversary in November or around Christmas, because it is a journey. It's a slice of history and all of that. Courage. That was the courage she had at age 23. And that was the courage she had when she sat across those FBI agents, because they were saying to her, basically, you need to tell us this or bad things can happen to you. And she wouldn't tell them. So that really showed what kind of a woman she had, all of the character that she had. So this was the next thing, okay? Ruby, and I wasn't surprised at this at all, because basically Melvin Belli, and I talked to several of his colleagues that I knew who couldn't say enough about his dishonesty. You know, it was really hard I liked the man. I liked him in some ways. He took me to the Major League Baseball All-Star game in his Rolls-Royce convertible, for God's sakes. But he was despicable in terms of not standing up for his clients, and then, of course, not standing up for Jack Ruby. Ruby's behavior to begin was very hyper. He was sweating profusely. I could see his heart beating. He asked me for one of my cigarettes. I gave him that. And this is the account of Detective Don Ray Archer that she put in this article. This is most interesting, because it will come up again when we talk about Robert Kennedy's death, and my belief, at least, that Sirhan Sirhan was the same sort of patsy to Carlos Marcello with the RFK death as he was with the Oswald Alone patsy in the JFK assassination. But in this situation, Archer says that he asked me where my cigarettes. I gave him a cigarette. About 2 hours elapsed. The head of the Secret Service came up, and I conferred with him, and he told me that Oswald had died. That should have shocked Ruby, because it meant the death penalty. And Dorothy gets all this. I returned and said, Jack, it looks like it's going to be the electric chair for you. Instead of being shocked, he became calm. He kept sweating. His heart slowed down. I asked him if he wanted a cigarette, and he advised me he didn't smoke. I was just astonished at the complete difference of behavior from what I expected. I would say his life had depended on him getting Oswald. So that's Dorothy had the trust of people. Dorothy had the credibility that they would tell her things that they would never tell anybody else about the assassination. But that is just supercharged interviewing with Archer, who trusted her. Next one. Oh, no, I want us to say one more about that. All right, so what you see there is that then Ruby, obviously, he had to know that he had done his job. All right, and then he could relax. And it's not a stretch at all that it would obviously come from someone like Marcello. Okay, next. That is the testimony that I have in Denial of Justice, and that I have in the rest of the books. It is He was talking that he would be there. Yes, that's where Ruby said he would be with Oswald. This is the headline in the New York Journal American, where Dorothy went ahead and exposed the Warren Commission Ruby testimony. Keep going. This is in denial of justice as well. This is where I kind of listed all of the evidence that she was told about with the Warren Commission. The commission members say the Oswald result is good for God and country, but there is internal corruption, and I don't know why. That's John Sherman Cooper, the senator. They already know about the connection to organized crime. They don't want to touch it. See, that's just terrible investigation, because it didn't take. It was just common sense that Marcello had the strongest motive to kill JFK. They never looked into. It's more than Oswald, but Warren keeps pushing the Oswald alone conclusion. I'm very skeptical of the single bullet theory is phony, a clever, ingenious cover-up investigated by a staff member. Our new president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, wants to cover up and move on. So she knew all of this, and this material that she knows, and people know that she knows, is ganging up, and it's leading her toward her death in 1965. So let's see what's next. Okay. So then let's go ahead and hit one more thing here before we get to her death. I'm asked all the time what caused Dorothy Kilgallen's death. Well, she's got all this information. The first thing is that she let it be known she was writing a tell-all book for Random House to name names. I believe that was Marcello orchestrating JFK's death, Hoover covering it up, Warren Commission corruption. Well, as you can imagine, these people cannot let that happen. But the kicker really at the end was that she learned about the fact, and so many people don't know this, and this would have changed everything if she would have put that in the book back then, and people are amazed that I was able to find this. There was John Sherman Cooper and Senator Russell demanding a dissent, a minority report, in the final Warren Commission report. And basically what it was saying, that Russell wrote, my inability to gather all evidence can't hardly read it.
It says the inability to gather all evidence in these areas, as well as a number of suspicious circumstances deduced from the record, has made, to my mind, preclude the conclusive determination that Oswald and Oswald alone, without the knowledge, encouragement, or assistance of any other person, planned and perpetrated the assassination.
Now, I put that in the letter here to Luna, Congresswoman Luna, because she has admitted that she believes after some investigation there were at least 2 shooters. So in the first paragraph, I said, listen, I've got corroborative evidence for you. I also in here, as you will see, have conversations that are up on, if people are really interested in this, go to YouTube and you will see accounts of LBJ and Hoover talking about the makeup of the Warren Commission. Maybe you know this, but a Warren Commission, and who should be on it and who shouldn't, and so on and so forth that way. At one point, they called Dorothy a dirty columnist, but also at one point LBJ says, Russell says, I don't believe in the single bullet theory, and LBJ says, I don't either. And yet they just went ahead with this Warren Commission and everything. But this dissent was promised to Russell and Cooper in the final report. And if this doesn't disgust you or people watching, I don't know what will. They were promised by Hoover, LBJ, Lee Rankin, it would be in there. And on the last meeting of the executive committee, they discussed this. And there was Russell and Cooper believed there was a stenographer there taking down the minutes of the meeting, because that had happened with every other executive committee meeting they had. And that woman was sitting just inside the door. So they waltzed out of that meeting figuring that there was a record of this. Later on, we find out that stenographer wasn't a stenographer at all. They just had her inside there so these guys would think it was being recorded. So there is no record of that happening. And when Cooper and Richard Russell find out about it, you will understand what their feeling was, because if you haven't already looked, and I don't think it's in here, and I probably should have put it in here, look at the photograph up on the internet of the moment when LBJ or when Chief Justice Warren gives the you might find it, Warren Commission report. See if you can find it, to LBJ. When Warren gives the report to LBJ. If you can't find it, I'll describe what it is. But anyway, look at the faces of Russell. He's standing on the left-hand side, and he has got a look on his face of disgust. Okay. Yeah, right there. Right there. That's it. Right there. Okay. All right, now look here, okay? There's Allen Dulles, CIA director on the Warren Commission. JFK had fired him the year before. You've got Richard Russell right there, Gerald Ford, who when LBJ and Hoover are discussing who to be on the Warren Commission, they basically say, well, let's put Ford on there. He can't chew gum and talk at the same time or something like. I mean, they thought he was a dummy, obviously. All right. Where is Cooper? He's hiding over here behind Hale Bogg. Look at him. His face is down. So this is Russell and this is Cooper. They were so distressed because in that document there was no dissent, and Dorothy knew that. And I think anybody watching over her, like Marcello was for sure, couldn't let her put that in the new book of hers. So we've got her to that point. Now people are wondering, all right, how did she die? Well, we do not know. We do not know what Jack Ruby told Dorothy Kilgallen during the 3 interviews at the Warren Commission. There's a photograph that people would enjoy in my books where it shows her holding her folder on her chest inside the courtroom. And that was her tablet where she wrote on it. They didn't have computers at that day. They didn't have a typewriter in there. She just wrote it all out. Well, she collected all of that and she kept it in her office in her home on 68th Street. And so that was going to be the information that she used along with the book manuscript, along with the book research for the manuscript that she had there for the book for Random House. So what did she do after? But we do know what she did the first thing after she interviewed Jack Ruby. She did not go to Dallas to look into LBJ. She did not go to Chicago to look into Giancana or the CIA. She did not go to Cuba, to Miami or Cuba, look into the Cubans. She didn't go anywhere except one place, New Orleans. And that's where Carlos Marcello's multi-million-dollar empire was. He had connections over into Dallas. Joe, a couple Joes, I can't think of their names right now, but Cirillo, one was Joe Cirillo. Those were the ones, and they were the ones that also looked after the carousel, which Marcello had a hand in, and all of that, the connection to Ruby. Anyway, so she went to New Orleans, and I believe she told people that she was going there because if the last thing I do, I'm going to solve the JFK assassination, and nothing is going to stop me. And she told too many people that I'm going to crack the case wide open. That was her main mistake of saying that. So she gets to New Orleans, and I have been able to show that her hairdresser, Mark Sinclair, went with her. And he said that they flew on separate planes. They got there, and then she left him and she went downtown. And I believe that she went to the bar owned by Marcello's brother. I think she was able, and I have a really solid source that connects Oswald, Ruby, and Marcello. That's something that nobody else has had in their books. I had some of it in Fighting for Justice. I'll have the remainder in the new book, Justice of the First Degree. But she connected all that. And so she came back to, she called Mark Sinclair, who was her confidant and hairdresser, and said, you go back to New York City. You don't tell anybody you were here, and you don't ask me any questions at all. And he went back there. And then she started telling people, including her hairdressers and other people, if the wrong people knew what I know about the JFK assassination, it would cost me my life. And that's in this document that I sent, the letter to the task force. It would cost me my life. I'm afraid for my life and my family. I bought a gun. So she was really scared for her life. She also told people, somebody's following me. I'm getting death threats and all of that. So she was scared. And it's obviously, it's obvious as to who was scaring her, because she was going to name names in that book she was writing for Random House. So on the night of November 8th, 1965, and people can go into the internet on YouTube and watch her last program. And there she is, just as I think, what did Bennett Cerf say to her? She had such spirit that night. Some people have obviously said that what happened later, that she had drug problems, alcoholic. That wasn't true at all. She was just as much in spirit as she had been on that show for a long time, and I've got that information in the letter to Congresswoman Luna. So you watch that show, and you see her guess the occupation of a woman who's one of the first female NFL sports writer, Eleanor Pena, who I've interviewed several times. But before the What's My Line show, she saw Dorothy at B.J. Clark's, which was a famous watering hole in Manhattan. I've been there. I've sat where Dorothy sat on the last night that she died. It was rather teary-eyed when I did. But she was there, and Eleanor Pena saw her, and then was on the show. So Dorothy then goes ahead and completes the show. She guesses, I think, 3 occupations, just as sharp as can be. And then she goes to the Hyatt Regency Hotel. Well, I had shown and proven that there was a hunk, muscle man named Ron Pataki, who was a journalist in Columbus, Ohio, who had an affinity for Dorothy and an affinity for getting ahead by knowing somebody with celebrity status like her. They met during a 20th Century Fox trip to Europe to publicize some of 20th Century Fox's films, My Fair Lady and some other things. And he took an attachment to her. She had a romance with him. No question about that. I've proven all that. And in fact, I've been able to prove through new information now that basically he knew about her about her book for Random House. He helped her write some of it. And obviously then I was able to finally show through another one of those experiences I cannot explain. I was able to find a Las Vegas casino boss, and some of this is in Fighting for Justice, and it'll be in the new book too, who I was talking to about Frank Sinatra, because I'd written about him in my books and his feuds with Dorothy Kilgallen, and her calling him getting after him for his mafia friends, and him saying she had no chin. I mean, it really got to be a vicious hatred for each other at one particular point. And I asked this man, Ed Walters, whose name I had to keep silent because he was afraid some people might kill him in the mafia in Las Vegas. who told me that, Ron Pataki, I know who that was, and I'd heard about him getting in trouble with the wrong people, gambling debts and whatever. So here comes along another perfect patsy that Marcello can use to squeeze out of Dorothy the information that she's going to put in that new book. And that's exactly what Pataki did. So she meets him, and I have proof of this, the last night at the Regency Hotel. They have an argument because she believes he's leaking her JFK assassination evidence to the wrong people. Shortly after that, they leave. He walks her home. She doesn't live very far. And I've been able to prove that Dorothy Kilgallen was poisoned by Ron Pataki with 3 barbiturates, not one, as the corrupt, mafia-controlled medical examiner's autopsy showed. She's dead. The police come. There's no investigation. They don't talk to any of her friends, none of her family, none at all. And through the medical examiner, they go ahead and decide the conclusion: she died of an overdose of barbiturates and alcohol, circumstances undetermined. The moment that happened, Dorothy Kilgallen, this incredibly honorable woman, mother of 3, credentials, character, all of that, she disappeared from view in 1965 until, and I guess I have to pat myself on the back, I wrote a book called The Reporter Who Knew Too Much. And that book took off because some people knew who she was, but a lot of people didn't. It became a bestseller. And I was able, and I'm so honored that I was, to go ahead and tell Dorothy's story up until, I found some new information recently and stuff like that. But I was so honored that I could do that. And I must tell you, her picture is right up here on the wall. I believe that in many ways, and people may think I'm a little batty here, but I believe that Dorothy Kilgallen, for whatever reason, chose me to tell her story. I can only tell you that many, many times during my 13 years or 12 years of research, things have happened to me where I have gotten material from the strangest places, like this guy in Las Vegas, like other things that have come to me that I believe Dorothy kind of guided me to. Now, you may think I'm crazy, and maybe that is a problem. My wife has told me she hates to see me say that because people may think that my credibility isn't as strong as it should be. But I have to give her credit for that. Now, I've gone ahead and taken what I've found out and researched it, and I take credit for all of that. But I'm very proud that I could do that. Now, before we get into, now all of that, by the way, was in the letter that I sent to the task force. Now, you have to think right now, I assume you're all thinking, wait a minute, you sent this to Congressman Luna, and by the way, I did it by FedEx. I sent her the manuscript for the new book. I sent her copies of my 6 books, okay? And I then copied 7 different members of the Warren Commission, the task force, with copies of the letter I sent to Luna. So there is no way that they can't know about it. And yet that letter is March 11th. This is the 20th.
20th, yeah.
And I have not heard one word from them, even though I asked in the letter to Luna, and the other ones have the copies, that Dorothy Kilgallen's investigation needs to be part of their investigation. I am very willing to come to Washington, D.C. They start the hearings on the 26th next month, or next week. I'm or Zoom or whatever they want me to do. I haven't heard from them whatsoever. So what's interesting to me here, since that time, when the new documents came out yesterday and today, about the JFK assassination. Any questions there? Or you want to go?
No, go ahead. Please continue.
All right. Thanks so much.
I mean, it's just like this is so relevant because all
Yes,
this information is coming out. They're going to have the hearings on the 26th. They're supposedly narrowing it to JFK, but all this stuff
Well,
is
I'll tell you
tied
why.
into JFK. So
I'll tell you why. I can tell you why right now. one of the big, I went through, perused not every line of it, but I perused all of the documents that were released yesterday, and I did that today as well. Just as I did, and I want to talk about this, the ones that were released in the last batch. First thing I did was I noticed that by doing a search, Dorothy Kilgallen's name is in none of the 80,000 pages of JFK assassination documents, and it may be more pages than that. Okay. The second thing I noticed, even though they're supposed to investigate Robert Kennedy's death, and I'll talk about, I don't want to forget to tell you about Robert Kennedy's death and my new evidence, is that basically it says, if I have the quote here somewhere, I think I do, that there's nothing about him except material about him in the Attorney General. There's nothing in there about his death. And I'll explain why that is. Okay. So what I did is I went through there, I looked at an awful lot of the material. Basically, it was interesting to me because it was like a wild goose chase, the JFK assassination investigation. They were all over the place. At some point, they're looking into Lee Harvey Oswald approaching the Soviet embassy in Mexico City in an attempt to get a visa to allow him to the USSR. He contacted a guy named Kozlov, who they then say is described as being without morals, education, and manners. That's a complete report on this guy. Then they go into a dispatch that they sent out. I don't think there's a date on here anyway. And then with Robert Kennedy, they say there's the widespread campaign of adverse criticism of the U.S., most recently again provoked by the assassination of Robert Kennedy, appears to have revived foreign interest in the assassination of their brother, and so on and so forth. But then they go no further than that. They don't investigate in any way of RFK's investigation. There's another one here that is quite interesting because listen to this, what they spent. It looks like about almost a year investigating Oswald being in Iceland and Helsinki, Finland. That was so important to them for some reason. Now, supposedly the CIA could have been involved or whatever, but it just was a wild goose chase. And then this one really bothered me because Robert Blakey, who was known as a stand-up guy, and he was the counsel to the Warren Commission and all this other kind of stuff. There's a document I found here where they say that Robert Blakey and staff director of the committee, says select committee, told state he wants to establish cordial relationships with the appropriate Portuguese national police, and so on and so forth. Now, this is what the Warren Commission was doing. There's the stay in Finland. There's there's all kinds of that material in there for hundreds and hundreds of pages. And that is really, really disappointing that that's what they were working on. Now, as far as Robert Kennedy goes, again, no mention of Dorothy at all. Robert Kennedy goes. About 6 months ago, I've always been obsessed with Robert Kennedy's death because I could never figure out what Sirhan's motive was, and nobody else is, frankly. Yes, he was upset over Robert Kennedy's allegiances with Israel. There are all kinds of other possible motives there that people talk about. And yes, in his papers and everything, I want to kill Kennedy. I do this, but his mental abilities after he was arrested and had a trial, which was a complete farce. I always was interested in that. So I thought, can Marcello be connected to Robert Kennedy's death? And just as you would have, William, because you're such a good researcher, I started looking into the whole Belli, Mickey Cohen, whatever. And I found that Mickey Cohen, at the time RFK was killed, was 1968. Well, let me just say this first of all. I said, who has the strongest motive to kill Robert Kennedy? Carlos Marcello. Why? Well, he's got this multi-billion-dollar empire now in 1968, 3 years after he orchestrated Dorothy's death through Pataki, 5 years after JFK's death. But what does Carlos Marcello know? If Robert Kennedy becomes president of the United States, what's the first thing he's going to do? because he knows that Marcello assassinated his brother. He will come after Robert Kennedy. Talk about motive. He cannot let Robert Kennedy become president of the United States. So I found Mickey Cohen, very close friend of Carlos Marcello. And then I found out that Mickey Cohen controlled the racetracks in Los Angeles, Santa Anita, and Hollywood Park. Well, I looked into some of this, and people, can go on the internet just like I did. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. Maybe I work harder or whatever on some of this, but they can go into the internet and they will find, as I put in my letter to Luna, I believe there may be a link in there that you have in there, but in there. Anyway, I told her about a man named John Scheer. And I first learned about John Scheer when he finally died at the age of 102. There he is right there. Who was John Scheer? Well, he operated the barn at Santa Anita Racetrack, where the hot walkers, those people who hot walk the horses after they were exercised, and he was beloved there. In fact, there's a video that people can watch, and I would encourage your people to do so as well as you, your viewers. You will see that he was a hero. There is a video of him being in the corral there, and horses are coming by, and he's directing traffic, and all at once, one of those horses goes wild and starts, jumping up and down and everything else like that. And there is a little girl I get shivers when I see this, when I think about this. There's a little girl standing there. And he puts himself between the little girl and the horse and saves her life. You can watch that on videos. And so that was when I first found out about him. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find anything about what he was doing at Santa Anita during the time of Sirhan Sirhan. And I found out that Sirhan Sirhan, from an account by John Scheer, had walked up to him in the horse barn and said, I need a job. And John Scheer said to him, well, all I have is hot walking. It pays $250 a month. And Sirhan said, I will take it. And then John Scheer, who's got to be the most honest man who ever lived, great credibility and everything like that, says in his in one of these videos, and I copied it down. He basically said, he comes by and says, I'm looking for work. Do you need anybody? I looked at the guy, not much taller than me, and said, the only job I have is a hot walker, and it pays only $200 a month. He said, I'll take it. We called him Sal, very quiet. And he was subservient, which is important. Not only would walk the horses, he'd clean the stalls and so on, so he'd sweep the back room and all of this. And then he says, a friend and I were in the back room one day, and Sal was reading the Los Angeles Times. He shouted out like Bobby Kennedy is arming Israel or something like that. And then he went into a rage. And he talked about Robert Kennedy and how terrible he was. He's killing my people. Go down a little bit. And John Scheer said, I said, calm down. What do you know about politics and so on and so forth? So, yes, there was that burst of hatred towards Robert Kennedy. So certainly people can take that into account. And then this was the most important thing I found out from John Scheer, and I have that in the new book, Justice of the First Degree, but it's in this document so people can read it. That's why I wanted to do this, William, so people can read this. He said, we were over at Hollywood Park, and I saw Sirhan go up the steps with these people. And I said to my wife later in the evening, I saw Saul at the racetrack, all dressed up, and he had money, and he's not working yet with these two hoodlums. I put in parentheses, Cohen's guys. I can't remember who they were, but I'd seen people before, and I think they'd been thrown out of Santa Anita track. On the day Kennedy was shot, I was working at the racetrack, and they flashed his picture on the TV along with who, do you know this man? My wife saw it was up and she called Hollywood Park and said, you talk to my husband. It's very, very important. So they got me on the phone and I said, guess what? Bobby Kennedy's been shot. And guess who shot him? Sal, and you have to tell somebody. And I ran down to security and so on and so forth. And then he tells the security. And then the next thing is what is very, very scary. Go ahead. Our phones were bugged for a year. I said, are you sure it's tapped? This one here. A little more. Every time my wife picked up the phone, there was a click, so it's tapped. And every time we've called the phone company and they wouldn't deny it and so on and so forth. But the most important thing he said is nobody ever contacted him about the account that he gave about Sirhan with the hoodlums. And where this then kicked in for me is that I don't know how many people know this, but when Robert Kennedy was when Sirhan was arrested, the first thing that the officers noticed that he was very calm, okay, just like Oswald or just like Ruby was. But second, he had four, not one, but four crisp $100 bills in his pocket. And obviously, it connects in with the fact, and all the other research that I've done with the authorities who were looking into this, the detectives, they could never figure out why he had the $400. He wasn't working. They could never figure out, anything. They never even looked into John Shear's. So that is why, in my opinion, there is nothing in there about John Shear or Robert Kennedy in these new this new dump of JFK's death, the records, because that would have not ever been in the files that were kept. So long and short of it, William, and I need to quit because I've taken up too much of your time. But I believe frankly, and I'm going to brag a little bit, I believe my research into JFK's death, of course, based on a great deal on Dorothy's, but my own. I know more about the JFK assassination than anybody does. Now, if people want to throw darts at me, I know they think that the CIA was involved, and maybe they were. But with the CIA, you got to go through a bunch of hoops to figure out what was going on, and Oswald and everything else, and motive and everything else. There is a straight line between the killing of JFK and Carlos Marcello. You don't have to make up anything. If you just use common sense, it's all right there. And I'm privileged to have this information, and also now that with new information about Robert Kennedy. One more thing that I'm going to do everything that I can based on this material to get Sirhan a new investigation, because I believe that he is not culpable for what happened with regard to Robert Kennedy. I think he was used by Marcello and others. He was there. If you look at the autopsy results, there is no question that the police also couldn't figure out how Sirhan shot Robert Kennedy all of those times since he was in front of Bobby Kennedy, and Bobby Kennedy was shot from the back. There's a lot of things that don't make sense.
Very close, very close. Noguchi said it was like 6 inches away from the back of his head. It just didn't make sense.
Exactly. So there's an organization called Project Innocence. I'm going to give them my research that's in the new book. But I'm hopeful, frankly, of three things. One is that the task force will include, I don't care if they decide I'm right or Dorothy's right or anything, but include it, for God's sakes, in the JFK assassination investigation. And I would ask those viewers that read this, and if they believe I'm on the right track, if they would get in touch with the task force people and tell them, for God's sakes, include that in there. Second, I want them to give Robert Kennedy his due in terms of what happened to him when he died, and Sirhan as well, so that investigation doesn't make the same mistakes that the Warren Commission investigation did. And if you read, if you go look, and I have it right here, of all the articles that are in there about the formation of this task force, starting with this Yeah. Oh, no, that's not in there. This is in there. Starting on February 11th of this year, the Congress of the United States and the Attorney General and everybody, and it's signed by Luna and Congressman Comer. And basically, then you go through and you can find all the articles that I found. This is going to be impartial. This is not going to be something just looking at conspiracies and so on and so forth. We're going to find the truth as it should be for the American people because they deserve it. I mean, there's all of these statements that Congresswoman Luna makes. And let me tell you something. I think the task force has good intentions. But unless they include Dorothy Kilgallen's material, her investigative evidence, and mine, I have to say, in this, they are not going to be able to come close to the truth about what happened to Jack Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. My opinion.
They have a lot of work to do.
Did I wear you out?
No, but it's really fascinating that all this stuff is still coming to the fore now in 2025. But where can people find your work? Is this document that we read through publicly available?
Yes. I thought I sent you the.
You sent me the PDF, but is it? Can you people find it at your website?
Yes, I will send you. No, I will send you. It's up on my blog.
Okay. And so I don't know what's your blog link.
Well, it's just what do you mean? What it's like?
Is it hosted on like a Substack or Medium or something?
Oh, you know me, the techno dope. I wouldn't have any idea.
Okay.
I'll send
you send me the link and I'll put it in the show notes so people can see it and read through it.
Yeah,
they can read through it their own leisure.
I'll send it right away.
Yeah.
All this is in there. Yes.
Yeah, so people can access it. They can see your things on Sirhan. I mean, the mob ties are incredible because these mob lawyers, like those are the ones handling these assassination people like Ruby and Sirhan. They're tied to the mob. Like that's very telling. And
you can't mess around with those people. I mean, you just can't. Motive. I just ask people. And it even all my investigation that I did of the authorities about Robert Kennedy's death, they all were perplexed by the motive. It just couldn't figure it out and everything, and why he was there at the Ambassador Hotel. By the way, the Ambassador Hotel was controlled by Mickey Cohen.
It makes perfect
Marcello's
sense.
buddy. All right.
Makes perfect sense. This is your website. Mark Shaw, author.
Mark Shaw.
18 books. This is our 7th interview.
That's amazing.
I'll post this today, March 20th, so 2025. March 26th is when the first hearing is just for JFK. So there should be 6 months of hearings. I mean,
we'll see.
February
it's next Wednesday. And it's markshawbooks.com, so that's fine. But I will send you this and I want to hear.
Send it to me. I'm saying if you post it, send me the link so people can follow the link.
I'm going to do that right now.
Good. So if you upload
and then I want to hear from people. And my email, I think you have mshawin@yahoo and so on and so forth. I answer every email.
Yeah, they can contact you through your website. So I'll put a link to your website.
Absolutely.
Mark, thanks so much for your time. Yeah, take care.
You're welcome, William. Thank you. I'll send that to you right now.
Stay there. Okay. You just